Morgan, welcome to this podcast. I'm so excited to hear how art can help us clean up our mental mess. I'm really excited. I love your work. Just looking through your Instagram and your colors of your painting just makes me so happy. I love the bright colors. So thank you for joining me on this podcast today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. I'm super grateful. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. Well, you just recently wrote a beautiful book, but before we start, though, it's about to come out. Before we do, just tell my listeners and viewers a little bit about yourself and who you are and something that's not in your bio.
Oh, I love that.
The
Well,
inside story. We want the inside story.
oh, yes, that sounds great. Yes, so I am a singer-songwriter turned visual artist and poet. So I'm 30, I'm 31 now. And from age 20 all the way through my 20s, I did a lot of music. I did a lot of traveling and I loved it. However, at the same time, it was very emotionally and physically exhausting and draining. And I'm so grateful that through all of that, somehow I was able to see that I loved writing and I loved making visual art. And it was in my sort of getting into my late 20s that I just started to slowly but surely get the courage to share some of what was going on the inside of me with others.
Oh,
And I am every day I am shocked by the fact that other people connect with what I share because I'm like, these are a lot of these things that I write, even though I'm writing for other people. They're my own journal entries and prayers and all of those things. And yeah, so that's a little bit about me, something that's not in my bio. I love watching movies and TV. I think sometimes, like, I've got the bookshelf behind me. I think people
yeah.
might think, oh, she's so studious. I am, but I also really look forward to watching WandaVision like every Friday. And I'm just
Yeah.
all the Marvel movies. And yeah, me
Yeah.
and my husband, like half of our conversations are about Marvel movies.
I
So,
love it. I love that. I have to share that little story you just shared. One of my favorite things to do is, especially when I had like a heavy day of like clinical trials and interviews and all this high level stuff, I get in my infrared sauna and I watch movies. So I'm
oh,
all there with you. Our family, we love movies.
yeah, I love that. Yeah, I think especially when your work is intense, like you just want to go in the other direction. You're just like,
Exactly. But it's so inspiring. Don't you find that movies inspire your work?
oh, absolutely. Yeah, it just
Yeah.
awakens so many ideas and just, oh, I never thought about that before. And yeah, I
I
love
know I
that.
find myself when I'm sitting there watching movies and I find, my gosh, this is so beautiful. And then there'll be a quote and I'll type that in my phone and I'll say, oh, there's
Oh,
something around there that could just be a beautiful thought,
oh
or a
yeah. I
beautiful
would, yeah. I
scientific fact. And
now that you're saying that, I want to watch a movie with you because
yeah, I think so.
I feel like
Hey,
you
how's
have a
that?
completely
We should do that. We should watch a movie sometime and then we analyze it and hear you giving all the
oh,
art and
that
the
would be
poetry
so
and
much
I'm
fun.
doing all the science. This is happening in your brain and this is the mental health. And wouldn't that be
Okay,
amazing?
yes,
Wouldn't
that
that
would
be
be
amazing? Okay, that's a date. We're gonna do that.
yes, that sounds like a lot
We'll
of fun.
we'll turn it into a podcast. We'll turn it
I
into some kind of a really cool podcast and we'll do some. Have you watched the Soul
yes.
movie?
Oh, yes.
Okay, I had to ask you that because that's
Oh my
exactly.
goodness. Yeah, that movie wrecked me
Yeah,
several times.
yeah, I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, we were all like wrecked. I mean, we sat there for an hour after the first
Mhm.
time with my family, just sitting and talking about like
Yeah.
tears and just like so, and I did a podcast
Yes.
just after that and the Soul movie came up. But
Oh. Yeah, that movie. Yeah, we did the same thing. Like we watched it on Christmas Day, and it's like here we are in the middle of Christmas Day having this deep conversation about the meaning of life.
I know it definitely stimulated the deep conversations. Oh gosh.
Yes.
Well, your work does that too. I mean, your work really does stimulate the deep conversations. So I'd love to transition to your book. Your beautiful, and I love the title, How Far You've Come. That's beautiful. So can you tell
Yeah.
us about why you wrote that book and what is it about? And I mean, I know gone through it, but share with my
Oh.
listeners. So
Well, thank you. Yes. So I am someone who shares a lot of poetry and a lot of art. And one thing that I have had a lot of people say to me, which I'm grateful for, but I was like, I want to show more of the story. I hear a lot of, wow, you're so positive, you're so encouraging, you're so optimistic. And I always say, thank you. And at the same time, like, it took a long time to get to a point where I could find joy and beauty in a lot of these chapters of my life. And I was like, I think I need to tell some of those stories. I think I need to talk about some of I write about failure. So I need to talk about some of the times I failed and
Yeah.
I was embarrassed or felt ashamed for failing. So that was sort of the bedrock of how the book started. I was like, let's tell some of those stories that explain the joy that comes on the other side. But a lot of it starts in the trenches. So the book goes through 8 different stories of my life and I stop in 8 states from Georgia in the US all the way to California in the US. And I tell a story in each of those landscapes. And then I've written poems around those landscapes as well. So, yeah.
It's beautiful. It's really beautiful. And I wanted to just select a few, and then I ended up selecting 20 different quotes out of there. So I had to discipline myself to choose a couple of them. And this one really jumped out at me. And it's the one, there you'll recognize the color.
Oh, yes.
I loved it. I love it. I'm going to read it to you, and then I'd love to just talk about what inspired this. And I just want to say how beautiful it is how you've taken art and poetry to just express and work through mind stuff, because as you know, I'm in the field of mental health. And I want to talk from once we've discussed this, I'd love to talk about art and poetry in terms of mental health and that kind of thing. So I'm going to read this first, and I'd love to chat about this. So when you look at the map and trace your fingers over hundreds of routes, you will find no finish line. Now that got my interest, no finish line, because I teach something similar with the mental health and the neuroscience that I do. So I thought, oh, this is really cool. One path leads to another. Beautiful. Some dwindle to dead ends, some orderly on grids, and others twisting around the ridge. Altogether, they create our family record, our times, our places, a story of unrushed travelers pushing forward at their own paces. I just love that. And you've got like a little beautiful art in the background. Talk about that. What inspired that? What is it telling us? Tell us.
I was inspired by the road itself. So the theme of this book, I felt at the beginning of it, I was like, this is about a road. It's about a journey. So I was like, let's look at an actual map. Like, let's just see what comes up. So I just hopped on Google Maps and I'm looking at all of these maps and all these roads just like layered and going in and out of each other all the way across the world. And it's like, there's no finish line here. Like there's no, you follow this road and then it ends, it's interesting because it's like, in my mind, I love to think, okay, I am here and then I need to get to here and then I need to get to here. And then that's good. Right.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you look at the map and you look at roads, it's like, wow, sometimes you just take a journey and you end up somewhere and then you go somewhere else. It's not I've gone back and that's bad. It's just like, no, you're in a different place now. And you can learn something from every place on that road. So that's how that poem was written, from just literally looking at the road. I was like, yeah, when's the last time I've just sat down and just looked at a map for no reason at all and to just see what I kind of saw in that. So yeah, that's actually one of my favorite poems in the book. So.
Oh, really? That's
Yes.
incredible how that caught my attention, because that really, when I saw that, and then now as you describe it with just Google Maps, how accurate that is in terms of explaining our minds, how they go all over the place and how there's so much deep intensity and so much richness and complexity, and how everything's okay because it's all part of the map. It's all part of and how what you said there's incredible. We don't have to just get stuck in, okay, I've got to go there, then it finishes, because it doesn't. That's just the beginning of another road. And if you divert along the way, that's okay. And sometimes it's a really bad diversion because something bad happens. And, obviously we don't want that to happen to us, but it doesn't have to, we don't have to let that own us. We can get back on the grid and we can go down another road. And yes, maybe it means you've got to go a different route, but we can keep going because that's the map just keeps going. It just never stops. That's what that said to me. It was like you can just keep going. There's no finish line. It's so hopeful. That's one of the things that I teach is that, to cleaning up your mental mess, which is the name of the podcast and also the name of my newest book, which is coming out soon. I teach that there's so much hope in diving into just having an acceptance of the future. And for me, that poem of yours really captured that for me. It just got me. So I'm so glad it's one of your favorite ones, because it's just, and now that Google map, I'll never look at a Google map the same.
Oh, yes.
It's very hopeful. So every time someone gets stuck, like mental health, if you think if someone gets stuck, we could just say, hey, go look at a Google map. And just think of that as your mind. And I'm going to quote you now when I talk about that. The Google Maps.
I love it. I love it. Yes, yes.
Beautiful.
I love
that. And I love that. Okay, then I want to pull up your Instagram. I love your Instagram. You did this beautiful painting. Okay, I'm going to come back to that now. I wanted to read this to you. You know this, but I'm going to read it to you. It's one you put up a couple of days back. Whenever you start to feel uninspired to create, remember, you don't have to. It's just as important to take time to listen and engage with the world around you. Welcome those uninspired moments as moments to simply be. Be gentle with yourself. Take time to process things. Listen, observe. Take time to take things in. Let the quiet moments fill you up. Let that be enough. That's just beautiful. I teach a concept called thinker moments, which is so important for your brain to rest because our mind never stops and our brain gets tired. And so our mind is not our brain, it's separate. And so I always teach people take thinker moments, if you can, every hour where you just let your mind wander. So that grabbed my attention because that's how I saw that the importance of, even if you don't feel uninspired, but just to take the mind, the time to listen, observe, take time to take things in, let the quiet moments fill you up. Let that be enough. That grabbed me and I want you to talk about that. And then I want you to talk about how if you're uninspired, accept that in this day and age where you've got to be productive all the time, and you know the whole sort of technological age and busy all the time doing everything, and then especially over COVID where you were supposed to invent a whole new everything, like like invent a whole new this, and people have been feeling guilty because they're not productive enough, and whereas everyone's got their own measurement of being inspired, and sometimes if you, I love the fact that if you're not inspired, that's also okay. So talk about that. I love that quote.
Oh,
that poetry.
Yes, I'm. Again, that's something else that I wrote recently. That's one of my favorites. Because I probably
listen.
Because
we
I'm
are
really
so
living...
in sync, Morgan. We are so in sync here.
We definitely are, and I sincerely mean that. That one is really special to me. So the other day, I actually just finished reading the audiobook for my new book.
Oh,
and
I know that feeling.
When I got to thanks. And oh my goodness, it was so hard to do because with the pandemic, I did it at home. So it was just me in the room. And I'm just like, I don't want to hear my writing. Like I want to read any other book but mine. Like,
I had to read I know I had to read my own as well because I also did, but we went to a studio because they had all the pandemic stuff, but I just did mine recently. And as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, I want to rewrite this now. I left this out.
That is how I thought. I was like, I could literally sit here and read the dictionary. I want to read any book but mine.
The dictionary.
So I got to the Arizona chapter and I had a just wild moment that I was not expecting. And I broke down in tears when I started reading it because I found revelations in my story. Now that story is about when I was 8 years old in that section of the book. And I saw things that I had not seen in that story, in my own story. And the first thing that came to me was, wow, it took over 20 years for this story to, one, for me to even talk about it, two, write about it, three, even see like what God was doing in my life. And I was like, wow, I'm so hard on myself. I expect to, I'm like you said, we're in this pandemic. I expect to okay, what have you learned? What are you going to make out of this? And it's like, what if I don't know for 20 years? I was like, this childhood moment was so significant to me. And I could see it even more clearly now, but I'm like, it took over 2 decades to see it. So I've just been thinking a lot about just asking myself, even I'm like, what am I willing to just sit on for a long time? And I think that we just have to have so much grace for ourselves because like you said, there is all that pressure to try to find meaning in it. And there's meaning in it. But if you don't find it right away, that's okay.
I love that.
You can give yourself that time. So that's something I am learning in real time right now. So that's where that's
incredible. But look how also what you said there, how it came out in when you wrote it, and you actually wrote that you didn't even realize that story was in you. And then as you were writing, the creativity of the writing and the poetry and the art pulled that story out of you. You know, and how you were willing to, I love how you said so the writing and the creativity pulled it out of you, which is so scientific. I talk about how you've got to dig deep and get it in your mind, get things that are buried in your mind and your brain and get them out, because that's how we can reprocess them and, you know, embrace them, process and reconceptualize. And you demonstrate. That's also why that grabbed me, is because you literally embrace something and then you processed it and you reconceptualized it, and then you express that through the art and the poetry and the writing process. And that's beautiful. And then also the fact that you accept that there's that time involvement. We always want to be so hurry sickness. That pre-COVID, we went into the COVID era with such a state of hurry sickness that I don't even know if you're aware of this, that people are dying 8 to 25 years younger. We hit the pandemic with that statistic of years of people just being in this lifestyle phase of not being able, you know, there are many reasons, but a lot of it is just not managing our mind. But what you say is so beautiful, to be at peace with 20 years that you took to actually process that story. So can you tell us about that story, and what did it change? What did it do in your life? What change happened? What did you learn from that?
Oh, yeah. So that story was about a family trip that we had taken. We're going to California, but we stopped at the Grand Canyon. And that was obviously a significant moment because, you know, at the Grand Canyon.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So it was just something that it was always kind of there in my memory, but I never really spent a ton of time with it. It was just like, oh, that was just a moment, you know? You go to the Grand Canyon as a child. That's a big deal. You remember it forever. So as I was writing this book and I was thinking of these different stories, and I got to Arizona, I was just like, gosh, I can't figure out why I keep thinking about this Grand Canyon moment. And because I've been at Arizona many times, like as a musician, and I was just like, but for some reason, I keep coming back to this story. I was like, I don't even think there's anything there. It's just like a random trip, but kind of like you said, the creativity. I was like, well, let me just write it from a creative perspective. I was like, all right, let's start with color. What color comes to mind? And it was orange. I was just thinking orange. I was like, okay, well, what was orange? Well, the canyon was orange. Oh, we had crayons on that trip. The crayons were orange. Oh, there's a lot of warm tones here. So I started working with the color first, actually. And then I just started to tell the story and talk about the actual journey of getting up to the Grand Canyon. And it was in that moment that I just described what I saw as if I had been there yesterday. I just described this childhood moment. And it wasn't, and I wrote it in the story about how I feel like God speaks to me through art and through nature, and how that kind of collides. And I didn't realize until I read it back that I think that moment, this might sound weird to some people.
No, not at all.
But I think that moment was like what ignited my calling to do what I do.
My goodness.
Because it was the mixture of everything coming together. It was the colors. It was my mom saying how great thou art when we stood there at the rim. And she just sang, it was the sunset. It was what I was learning about nature. It was all of those things just collided together at the same time. And I was like, that was the moment. That was the moment where I felt like I had permission to create, and to create in a way that I felt like God was speaking to my soul.
Wow.
And
that's beautiful.
Prior to that moment, I mean, I was young, but I I struggled a lot as a kid with loneliness. I was a homeschooled preacher's kid.
Mm-hmm.
I have one sister, so we didn't have a ton of kids around, and I struggled a lot. But on that day, I felt freedom. Like I felt like there's a part of me that I don't know how to express it yet, but this is something. So you may be able to, I'm still finding the words for it. It's still really hard to explain, but I was just like, I wouldn't have picked that up 10 years ago. I wouldn't have. I'm like, it took all that time. So that just makes me wonder. I'm like, what other stories do I have?
Head.
It's
that's amazing. That's so beautiful and encouraging for people, because what other stories are there? And you know, there's a science concept that's happening here. Quite interesting. I mean, there's everything you're saying. I can go and picture all the science stuff and tell you neuro, mind, whatever. But there's a concept called retroactive causation. And what that is that the future and the past and the present all blend. So now you're in the future, but the past, at that point, your future was already happening. So today, when you're talking about this, you already had that indication at that age, but it's taken you, it's been sitting there, done. It's now that you've gone back in time, so it's retroactive causation. So like the past is influencing the future, and the future is changing the past, because now you're looking back differently as an adult at that time as a child, and you're seeing it from a different angle. You have the meaning behind it. So you've time traveled, and our mind is time traveling, and how we can actually heal in ourselves from those kind of things. Because maybe there was, I don't know, that brought any sort of healing into your life or hope or whatever. But sometimes, just that what you've just shared made me think in terms of someone who's gone through a trauma, and to go back to that time. And a lot of people that work, what we need to do with trauma is go back as an adult to when that happened as a child, and to actually see it differently, because you're now going back as an adult and you can protect your child self, and you can look back and see it from a different perspective and help the child who couldn't process it at the time, which is what you've spoken about, a positive thing. It's a calling, but a trauma you can't process at the time. It's at age, and then now you got insight into this calling at this age. You can, by the same token, that story can be unpacked at a later age when you're ready to unpack it, so that you can get the freedom from it and move forward. So that's kind of what that spoke to me when I read that part of your book. It kind of spoke to me about retroactive causation.
Wow. Well, that is amazing, because I'm like, I had no idea. I knew nothing about that. And that is so fascinating, because I feel like you just described that experience. And honestly, that's something that, what I hope to do with my artwork. So I invite people to send their stories to me via social media or via email. And then a lot of my artwork is inspired by what people actually send me. So I respond with art.
That's beautiful.
A lot of times that's what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to, some people often bring up something in the past. And unfortunately, I've received just way more than I would ever want anyone to have to go through in terms of stories that have to do with trauma. And it's so heartbreaking. And all I want to do in that moment, because I'm like, I can't fix it. I'm not a professional. I don't even know the right things to tell them. But I was like, I just want whatever is beautiful in their story to be reflected. And I want them to see that beauty in their story, whether that's like, sometimes I will literally write, I'm not trying to just like plug my book again, but I will literally write like, I hope that you're proud of how far you've come. Like, I know you feel like you have so far to go, but I just want to be one stranger on the internet to just let you know you have come so far, and that never should have happened to you. And that is not okay. And you are so worthy of love. And that's a lot of times why I'll write some of those simple words over and over again, because, my hope is that, whatever capacity that is a part of their story too. Because like you said, there is that shadowy part, that part that we wish didn't happen. And I just hope that we can also have that other part for sure.
Well, you're definitely playing a very significant role, because it's not about us, it's about us in the world. And there's something that you can do that no one else can do. So you're meeting a need. Each of us needs to reach out and meet a need in the way that whatever way we can, to help others in kindness and love to be able to process what they're going through. And it's the kindness that's coming through very evidently in your work, to just reach out and to help people. Because there's a unique, as you say, you can't fix it, but just by saying the words of the Google map, and just by saying the words of go back and give yourself permission to, may not know what it meant then, but you can know what it meant now, what it could mean now or into the future. And you're able to do that with art. There's a beautiful art form, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, called kintsugi, the Japanese art form.
Yes.
Okay, so your work reminds me a bit of that. What you've just said now reminds me a little bit of that, where the pieces are shattered, they rebuild with gold lacquer. So it's a beautiful new piece of art, but it looks different. And there's your story, the gold. And I often, when I explain with my work, thoughts are real things. We build thoughts into our brain. So this is a whole, thoughts look like trees. And if it's a toxic thought, then it's a toxic tree. And it's actually physically is like this in your brain. I mean, not quite like this, but this is a representation. The way I see your work is this kintsugi principle of we embrace this, we process it, we reconceptualize it, and we rebuild it. So in amongst the new reconceptualized, there's the story, but now it's gold. It's not black anymore. And it's the new way that we're moving into the future. And you're encouraging people, the way I see it with your art and your poetry, to just look at that more, that to have that, not just the harsh reality of the pain of working through, but to also have that little bit more spiritual, creative side. That's how I would see it in terms of mental health. But can you take that a little bit deeper and talk about poetry and art and mental health and reconceptualizing pain and
Yeah. And a lot of it is in my own story, I mean, when I started, so I make a lot of digital art, and I started making this art when I was in a very uncertain season in my life. And there had been some death in the family. There were some health issues. There was career issues. It was just
Yeah,
like
a
piling
lot.
up. And it was a lot. And what's so interesting to me is that I look back on that time and I was still making some of my proudest artwork to this day. And I'm like, how did
Wow.
these things happen at the same time? I'm like, when I look at the date that I painted that
Wow.
on, like these things happened at the same time. So I think about that a lot when I'm
Wow.
making art for others. Sometimes, like, I mean, because again, I will receive some really heavy stories.
I can imagine.
I've unfortunately had moments where someone would submit on someone's behalf, and by the time I got back to them, the person had passed away. And in that moment, I'm just like, what on earth am I supposed to say? And I literally would say, well, just start with blue. Blue is calming. Start with blue. Maybe it'll make them think of the ocean, the open sky. And that's why I loved abstract. I love to just put the color there and let them figure out, what does that blue mean to them? What does that yellow mean? And sometimes I will just literally put these colors on my Instagram story. And I've received messages like, this was someone that I love. This
Oh
is
my
their favorite
gosh.
color. And they passed away. And it made me
Mm.
think of them. Thank you for sharing this color. And it's just like, it's just color. Like
Wow.
there weren't even any words on it. I get chills when I think about that.
But
I mean,
just
for me,
kindness. It's color
it's,
with kindness. You've
yeah,
carried
it's,
that through. There's a whole quantum physics principle here. You gave them that out of the care and the concern. And so it didn't come just as a color, it came with a whole package of
wow.
love and kindness. So
Wow,
yeah.
that is
So
that is amazing. Yeah, and I feel that very deeply. So even with, during this pandemic, my own just restlessness and
mm-hmm.
uncertainty that I have dealt with, there have been many times where, I will feel that pressure. So I have a little one. My son is 20 months. Well, actually,
No.
is he 21 months today, actually? Yep. Almost. Okay.
Oh,
Getting the
congratulations.
days mixed up. Thank you. And there are days where I'm like, okay, he's taking a nap. Like, I gotta go work. I gotta go
Yeah,
be
yeah. Grab the
productive or
5 minutes.
something.
Yeah, be productive.
Yeah. And then I get to my desk and I'm just like, I have nothing. So I will
Oh,
literally just take my iPad and, like I said, I will just paint blue or just scribble, and I'll share that. Like, because I don't know, for me, I just feel like there's something in that too.
yeah. There's something in that uninspired moment, but it is actually
Yeah.
inspired.
Yeah, and so I've actually been giving myself permission to share things that are half finished, or they're not as near as to the level that, because I can be a real perfectionist about my art, and
Yeah, I can
I'm just
imagine.
like, let me just share it as it is, and maybe that will connect with another mom who also wishes she had more time to make art, and she looks at that and says, "Oh, that probably took Morgan 5 minutes. Like maybe I can make something like that too." And for me, just doing that has just brought me so much peace. And I honestly think because it kind of brings me back to childhood a little bit. I used to just scribble and draw, and there was no Instagram to worry about. There was no book deals to worry about. I didn't
Yeah.
care about any of that stuff. It was just like, here's a blue crayon and I want to do something with it. And it brings me joy. So
Oh,
there you go.
that's
So
beautiful.
I think I'm trying to get back to that place because that
I
was
love
really
that. You're
fun.
getting back to that sort of digging deep inside the depths of that wired for love survival
Mhm.
mode, or, made in love image that we have. And it's in the depths of you and expressing itself through the color coming through. And what you said there's in that uninspired moment, giving yourself permission to not finish something. And that's still okay, not to have everything
Mhm.
perfect and ordered. We want to have this package that's all beautifully folded and done.
Yeah.
We've become so goal orientated that we've forgotten all about the process. And I know we keep talking about this, but what you're saying is you're giving people through art to actually experience this. You said something else that's incredibly significant. You said that when you were going through some really challenging stuff,
Mhm.
that's when you seem to produce some of your best work. And it was at the same time, and that's something that's very powerful. I mean, myself personally, I've experienced that. I've been going through some incredibly challenging times, and I've done like heavy clinical trials and written heavy science books and journal articles, and thinking, where did I get that? You sort of at the same
Yeah.
time. So talk about that in terms of mental health. How do you see How do you see that experience? Because you seem quite taken with that concept.
Oh, yeah. In a way, I feel like it's a bit of a mystery to me. I feel like you would have more language than I do, but I do feel like in times of stress, chaos, again, just unfortunately, just death in my family, that it's just changed a lot of things. I go inward. I go really, really inward. I kind of like just go into my shell, withdraw. That is what I do. So yeah, I feel like for me, making art, even I don't even want to say making art. I want to say just scribbling, like literally just doodling, scribbling. Like it's not even as fancy as making art. Of just it's something about even that gesture of just starting to slowly move a little bit again with my hand that unlocks something for me. And then I feel like from there, I kind of gradually grow into more movement, if that makes sense.
That
Because I
totally makes
really,
sense.
I really do feel like physically stuck, like in those low
Mm,
places. I'm just like, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm just gonna sit here and just sit here. And
yeah.
then I feel like, yeah, because I feel like, and I try to be very careful about this in the language of what
Mm,
I share is, especially people who are grieving, because I've been there. I
mm-hmm.
I want to be very careful about, like, I don't want to make people feel like they just have to jump up and be better, immediately.
Mm,
It's like maybe the bravest thing you did today was, oh my gosh, I actually really brushed my hair today. Like like
yeah.
that's progress. Or oh, I cooked something that I enjoyed, or I opened the blinds and I let the sunlight in. I don't think we give ourselves enough credit for those small things, those
Mm-hmm.
small movements. So for me, I just feel like literally even writing nonsense in my journal of just like moving that hand, it's just like, okay, you're still
Therapeutic.
alive, you're still
Therapeutic.
here. It's just work it out slowly and slowly. And then, gradually you'll move forward. And yeah, I think that's one benefit of having kind of been in my Instagram DMs and emails for so long and over the past few years
Yeah.
is because that's what I tell other people. I'm like, I want to encourage you to have grace for yourself on this journey. So I'm learning through that. I've learned, like, okay, well, you've got to apply that too. Like you can't
Yeah.
you can't just tell other people, like, have grace for yourself. It's a pandemic while you're simultaneously being really hard on yourself. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you have to apply that to yourself. So actually
Exactly.
tomorrow, I have nothing on my calendar tomorrow. I don't know how that happened, but I'm not asking questions. I'm like,
You
I'm going to
accepting
do
it.
nothing. Yeah.
And you're going
I'm
to
going
do
to do
nothing and
nothing.
you're going to be
Mhm.
comfortable with doing nothing.
Yes, yes. Because that's what I would encourage others to do who've been working really hard and who've been trying to survive and work through all of this.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm definitely working on applying that to my own life.
Well, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And to know that in those moments of maybe you don't produce a work of art, that we've got to stop measuring this, have this external measure. It's, if
Mhm.
I'm hearing
Yeah.
you correctly, is when we have those moments, we can really dig in deep and just get reconnected with the deepest part of us, which is this deep thinking. And that's
Yeah.
something that has changed a lot in the last 40 years in the research I've done is people aren't thinking deeply enough. And this pandemic's forced people to rethink. And as humans, we need it. Our mind needs it. Our brain needs it. Our brain builds up toxic waste when we don't have these moments of beautiful, deep thinking. And then in the midst of that, you go, that have those depths of deep thinking. And then, as you said, you in the midst of a crisis, you produce some of your best work. We just don't know
Mhm.
what's going to happen as we go through life, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
It's so
Absolutely.
interesting. Yeah, it's fascinating. And I love the grace part that we need to give ourselves grace.
Yeah.
That's definitely a message that's coming through very strongly. But I think that we're saying it, but are we doing it? Like
Absolutely.
you said, you've got a day off
Yeah.
tomorrow, but are you going to keep that like you don't?
Yeah.
Because we'll be, it's Tuesday. I've got to have all this productivity, and I've got to have
Yeah.
this and this and this and this lined up. And now you're sitting. Can you sit with yourself? Can you
Mm.
sit and be still and just enjoy that and see what comes out of it? And I love what you
Yeah.
said about the depression or like being in a really bad place. You've just withdrawn, just to do some scribbling, just to
Mhm.
open the blinds, something, just start. So their art's really beautiful. You don't have to be an artist. You can just start
Yeah.
scribbling and writing some
Absolutely.
words. And
Yes, I wish I had a picture of it, but one of my quotes that ended up being like shared quite a bit and has become more popular. It came from a page in a journal where literally I had just been scribbling. And one of those, like, most of the page is pretty illegible. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And for some reason, within all of that, there was a small little corner of the page where I wrote, I cannot tell you what will happen, but it will be different when the light pours in.
Oh,
And it was in a page. It was a big journal. Like, it was like beyond the standard size. It was a massive journal. And I
it was this little corner.
Yeah, little corner. And I wrote it. And I still remember the moment where I went back and noticed it weeks later. I didn't see it that day. And I was like, I don't even remember writing that, but it's in my handwriting. I wrote it. And yeah, to me, that is a reflection of life. I'm like, it's going to feel like a lot of scribbles. It's going to,
a lot of circles, a lot of mess. And then suddenly this in the corner of the page. I mean, I'm thinking of so many significant things there, how we've got to get through all this maze, all these thoughts in our unconscious mind, which are like forests. And we've got to get through to find that pearl of wisdom, which then just gave you that inspiration for however long and how many people were inspired by that. Just say that quote again.
Yes. Yes. I cannot tell you what will happen, but it will be different when the light pours in.
Oh, it's one of those things that just, you see, it resonates with our survival, our wired for love mode, our made in love's image. You know, just, it's beautiful. Yeah, that really is very, very powerful, and it inspired you and inspired so many others. How beautiful. I love that. Okay. So, oh gosh, we could talk for hours about this. So you put up a post. I love, where's this one? I fell in love with this.
Oh, like thank you. The flower.
Oops. Yeah, it's so beautiful. It jumped off now. Where's it gone? Let me just bring it back. Now tell me about that. What happened there? What was going on there? It was just gorgeous. Yes. I'm just going to bring it back up again so everyone can see how beautiful it is. Oh, I just jumped out of it. Go ahead. You explain when I
Yeah, so those were some flowers that my husband had bought for me for Valentine's Day. And they were sitting on our dining room table. And I just took pictures of them. And I was like, I just really love these. And then I started playing around with different coloring. And I was like, this is something I could paint over. So I actually took the photo and I put it on my iPad and then I painted over the flowers.
So there's the flowers and then you painted over them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, when I saw that, I thought, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I was just really proud of myself because it was, it was a regular, grocery store bouquet. And I was just like, wow, I feel like I made something unexpectedly beautiful. Yeah. And
when I saw this, I thought, I need that. That was my reaction. I need that. It's so beautiful. It's like really, I mean, that's beautiful. So there was
I'll have to turn it to print, get it to you.
I won't say no. It's just beautiful. What word comes to mind for you with this painting? So you asked people to what word comes for mind. I just felt, for me, it was joy. It was just, I looked at it and thought I could look at that all day long and be happy. And I have a painting in my room that's sort of similar kind of feel. And I loved it. And it just gave me such a sense of joy and peace. Wow. And I thought, well, that's a really good mental health reaction to have to that.
Oh, that's so.
I wanted to thank you for that.
Oh, well, thank you. That means so much to hear. And yeah, I felt a lot of joy also as I was creating that. And now that you're saying that, I'm thinking about it a little bit deeper because I put a lot of words in my artwork, and with that one I didn't. And now that we're talking about it, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, because sometimes you don't have the words for joy. Like you can't quite intellectualize it the way you want to. You just have to experience it.
It's experience.
Yeah, and allow yourself to interact with that joy, if you will. And
yes,
that's something. Yeah, it's interesting. Once again, that's another thing. I wouldn't have picked up on it when I was painting it. And now here I am.
But you see, so that's what, when I was looking through that and I was flicking through it, I thought, this is like, I mean, it just got me. And I felt this sense of peace. And I know that when I feel that, I know that my heart secreted something called atrial nucleic factor that's creating a sense of peace in my body. And I know that the two sides of my brain have got increased theta. And so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, this is all going on in my brain and my body. This is what this painting's doing to me. And I suddenly thought, how beautiful art and mental health. So would you just in sort of like a closing question, would you recommend that when people are feeling like, down, just go either paint something or just look at something beautiful? Because it's something that I tell people, but you as an artist, and how do you link just experiencing beauty and mental health?
Yeah. So for anyone listening who has a smartphone, go download Adobe Fresco. It is a free app. That is like the first place I love to tell people to start because there are a lot of creative like painting apps out there. But what's
Yes.
special about this one is the watercolor section where
Ah.
it's a live watercolor. So when you go to paint with it, you can literally know nothing about art. Like all you have to do is click on the brush and it actually interacts live. Like
Oh
as
my
your thumb
gosh.
hits
Sounds
it, the
fabulous.
colors like watercolor does, it actually works like water. There's something so calming about that. Like I literally have shown
Wow.
people in my life, like my husband, who are like, I'm not an artist. I don't do anything. Like play with it, and now they're interested.
That's so
um,
cool. Wow. What
yeah,
is it?
I
What is it?
love. Yeah, it's
What
called Adobe Fresco. So it's like,
Adobe Fresco. So that's
yeah,
super
it's
easy
a free.
to remember.
Yeah, it's a free app. No, there are a lot of features in there. Don't worry about all the other features. Just
Just do the watercolor
do
one.
the watercolor and just see what it does. And I think that's a
Uh,
good starting point because, you know, again, a lot of people are home all the time. You may not have the creative space that you normally have. So I like to say, you don't have to have all that. If you have a phone, you can start there. And then beyond that, I love coloring with my son's crayons. Like I don't have any fancy artist crayons. I actually think, and you may have more language about this, but something unlocks for me when I use
yeah.
like child crayons. Like
Wow.
it's
Something from
something,
your like
yeah, it's like, oh, there's a
core
different kind
stuff.
of play. Because one thing I
Love
think
that.
I love fancy art supplies, but one thing that I always caution against fancier art supplies is when you buy fancy supplies, you feel like you have to make fancy art. So that's why I
Ah,
like to recommend that you use things that are already around your house or things that kids would use because it just takes the pressure off. Like
I
you know,
love
you're
that.
not worried about making a masterpiece if you're using like kids crayons, but if you go and buy
Exactly.
like, oh, I spent, you know, $70 on these
This
pastels,
beautiful thing. And
yeah, you're gonna put that pressure on yourself to make something.
yeah.
So yeah, even as an artist, I try to keep those child play things in my life because it just helps keep the joy in it and not go right into the overthinking aspect of it. So
Oh, I love that. I love that. I love the crayons idea. You know, how many times does one go to a restaurant and there's, you know, crayons and things on the
oh
table and then
yeah.
the adults grab it. I mean, my family, my
Yes.
kids do, especially my younger, she'll grab and even though she's like 22, you know, it's sort of, yeah, there's something
Mhm.
about, you know, and just coloring in and painting and just,
Mm.
even if it's not, you know, like I look at what I produce, it doesn't look very good, but I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just, that's the process and just the
Yes, it's the
experience.
process.
And, but I love what you
Yeah.
said. If you just grab what's around the house, you don't feel that pressure to
Mhm.
create a work of art and you're just expressing
Exactly.
yourself. It's just a way of getting, one of the things that's so
Yeah.
important with mental health is to get it out. And that's what I'm hearing you say, isn't it?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And it's so much harder to do it when the color pencil costs $12 because you feel like, is it
Ooh.
okay to use this way?
Meanwhile, if
So
it's a little
yes.
pack of crayons that costs you $1 or from the
Yeah,
dollar
go to
store,
the dollar store. I seriously mean that. Yeah, start at the
I
dollar
love
store
it.
and just scribble it all out.
Oh, I love it. Oh, Morgan, this has been beautiful. I've so
Oh,
enjoyed our conversation and love what you do. And thank you for the kindness that you bring with your art, because there's so much kindness that just, you know, that's just what's hitting me as well is kindness when I talk to you and with your work and what you're doing. And you obviously touching so many people's lives. So where can people find out more about you and your new
yeah.
book? Where can they get your new book?
Yes, well, thank you so much. Yes, I am at morganharpernichols.com. There's like a thing on there that says new book, and you can
Yeah.
click on that. And then I'm on Instagram at Morgan Harper Nichols, and it's exactly the same on YouTube, Pinterest, and even TikTok. I'm over there
Oh,
now. So
that's
yeah,
wonderful.
come find me.
Fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, thank you so much for this interview. I loved it. I feel happy just doing this. I
Oh.
feel like it's just been so much fun and I've, you know, just it's such a beautiful way of expressing. We've got these beautiful ways to express ourselves. And so thank you for just giving us
Mm,
the simple start. I mean, to get that app, to just get some crayons. You've just given, you know, when you're in that really bad place, it's okay to just, you know, go. It doesn't have to be a work of art. And if you don't aren't productive in that moment, if you don't feel inspired, it's okay.
yeah.
I love how you
Absolutely.
said that in that one quote is that if you don't feel inspired, that's okay. So
Yep.
just in closing, can you just talk a little bit more about if you don't feel inspired? Because people probably think, oh,
Yes.
you're obviously naturally inspired and you just know what to do. And
Oh, yes, of course. Now, I know pretty much nothing about science, but one time I did read something about how inhaling, another word for inhale is inspire. And I find that very fascinating. So
beautiful.
I was like, all throughout the day, we're inhaling, we're taking
Yeah,
things
that's
in.
beautiful.
So you're literally like, the way I see it is like you're being inspired, you're inspiring, you're taking in. So just take in. So even if you don't, like, one thing that I try to remind myself of, if I don't feel like putting out, like, that's a moment to listen. Just take in. Like,
So good.
so just give yourself that permission. Just
Oh,
take it in. And then
that
when
is
it's ready to
so
come
good.
out, it'll come out.
That is beautiful mental health.
Oh.
Really, I love that. Thank you so much. That's such a wise word. Really, I love it. Inhale. Every time I
Thank
inhale
you.
now, I'm going to think of this inspiration.
Yes, just
Just
taking things
observe.
in.
Just let it in. Just let it come in.
All the
Don't have to always
senses.
produce. We always want to produce, but sometimes you just need to sit back and let it
Yeah.
all come in. And maybe it takes
Yeah.
20 years, but it'll come out.
And that's all a part of the process.
It's all part of the process. Oh, well, thank you for joining me today. And I look forward to another conversation with you. And it's been wonderful. And thank you so much.
Oh, yes. And thank you as well. This has been such a joy. It really has.
Oh, thank you.